Hi there guys, it's Adam Martin here, and welcome back to another video, and it's finally time that we took a look at the third and final 60th anniversary special of Doctor Who, which is titled The Giggle. Sorry this has come a few days late after transmission. It's the usual mix of things at the minute. What with pantomime, we're doing at least 12 shows a week, which is very intense and not having much time off, but I'm finally got the time now to do this review for you. But before we get into it, leave a like on the video, subscribe to us here at AMTV Who for more content in the future. So this is it, the big whammy, one that people were, I think, arguably looking forward to the most, The Giggle. This is for several reasons, obviously. It's the final special to feature David Tennant as the 14th Doctor. We were going to see the introduction of Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor. We've got the Toymaker returning after 57 years, played by Neil Patrick Harris, which I think is wonderful. We're going to dissect everything, but I want to touch on first is something that spoke to me as a TV, media nerd, is that we get the appearance of John Logie Baird. Now, John Logie Baird, of course, is the inventor of television, and we see in this episode he's doing his experiments to get it up and running in 1925. Now, television officially didn't launch, or a service didn't launch until over a decade later in 1936, but those experiments that Logie Baird was doing went all the way back to the mid-20s, and it was so great to see the Stooky Bill puppet, which, if you've watched some of my documentary videos, you'll have seen footage of that puppet, basically, how it was used as a test to sort of prove that television works. Again, as someone with a big passion for TV or just media history in general, to sort of weave that story into the overall plot was quite nice. It's not the biggest focus, they don't spend the majority of the story in 1925, but I think that's absolutely okay when weighed up with everything else. But I just want to give a little thank you to the team of Doctor Who for, sharing Logie Baird a bit more, hopefully introducing him to a lot more people. Maybe people want to go and find out about Stooky Bill, the puppet, or Logie Baird in general, so that made me very, very happy. But I think the meat and potatoes of this episode has to go to the Toymaker. Now, as I said, the Toymaker hasn't appeared since 1966 when they were portrayed by Michael Gough, and now they're portrayed by Neil Patrick Harris, who is a big star, has been a big star for ages, so for him to come to Doctor Who is a massive draw for the show, certainly. And what I like right off the bat is the Toymaker is, I think they retain that playfulness that they had in their original appearance, whilst also leaning into some more over-the-top aspects. Like, for example, they play around with different over-the-top accents. There's like German, French, even a British accent. What I love about Neil Patrick Harris's portrayal is that there are moments where you're almost like laughing along with him at the ridiculousness of everything, but he can take that and turn it into steely seriousness at the drop of a hat. And just the sheer power of the Toymaker, particularly in the first 2/3 of this episode, I feel you really get a sense of just how powerful this being is, this elemental force from a different realm, a different universe, if you like. The way he can manipulate people into these games, what he does to people in these games. There's a particular scene which shows how he just manipulates reality, but we'll come to that a little bit later. But I think Neil Patrick Harris portrays it wonderfully. It reminded me a little bit of the way John Sim portrayed the Master, back in the late 2000s, that sort of manic quality he had about him, but he could also showcase how powerful he was. And I think those kinds of villains are often the most genuinely scary in a way, ones that you can sort of laugh at when they're being ridiculous, but also give you a little shiver when they, stop all that and it all gets pretty serious pretty quickly. One scene in particular I loved was when they're in the Toymaker's shop, and he does the little the show for them, sort of catching Donna up over the past 15 years as to what's been going on. And he mainly focuses on companions. We get references to Amy Pond, Clara Oswald, Bill Potts, all specifically companions who have died in one form or another whilst travelling with the Doctor. And I love that dynamic of the Toymaker saying how they died, but then the Doctor coming back, almost trying to defend, trying to justify this, like Amy Pond, well, she died of old age, it's natural. Clara, she lives in her last second of life. Bill, her consciousness survives. And as the Toymaker says, well, that's all right then. That line is so punchy, and I've seen this episode 3 times now. I've had more time to rewatch it, and every time that hits like a gut punch. And I think you see in Tennant's reactions as well how much that's a gut punch. Obviously, Tennant's right in what he's saying. Those companions do, like in Clara and Bill's case, they do survive in one form or another. But the Toymaker's making the point is that they died. They lost their lives because of traveling with the Doctor. And Donna briefly tries to bring it up. She says, is all of this true? But then the Doctor challenges to a game and we move on. But I love these scenes in Doctor Who. Not necessarily where the Doctor's held accountable, although that's what the Toymaker's trying to do, I guess. But just where you see those moments catch up with him. There's a whole theme in this episode about constantly running, wearing yourself out, living off fumes, etc. And I think that speaks to it, you know, that David Tennant's 14th Doctor hasn't had the time to really stop and process some of these companions who have left him. And the Toymaker bringing that up is deeply uncomfortable for him. And I think that's a great thing to show for this character. I love the Doctor in those moments of vulnerability. There's a moment a little bit earlier where he's saying to Donna, you know, he's lamenting that the Toymaker's back, how, you know, take away his TARDIS, the sonic screwdriver, the fact he's a Time Lord. What is he then? Those moments, I think, are so important for Doctor Who. Whilst it is great that the Doctor is, you know, he always manages to get out of the scrapes, he seems to know what he's doing, but I think we should and can show those more vulnerable moments as well, even in the most confident of incarnations. We learned some interesting exposition from the Toymaker as well. For example, that the Master played a game with him and lost and is now sealed inside the Toymaker's gold tooth. Again, I thought that was a bit of fun ridiculousness. However, that will play in a little bit later. If you've watched it, I'm sure you know what I mean. But also he mentions the one who waits, the one being that he could not play a game with. Now, I've already seen speculation as to who this might be. Some are saying it could be the Valyard, some are saying it could be Omega, like a classic returning villain again. Part of me would really want it to be something original. I'd love for them to introduce like a new sort of godlike being, or this being that even the Toymaker's afraid of. I think that would be a fantastic addition, but I guess we've got to see during Ncuti's run if this gets resolved on. I want to touch on the 14th Doctor themselves, because amazingly, in just 3 specials in 3 one-hour programs, David Tennant has managed to carve out this incarnation who, yes, does bear some similarities with the 10th Doctor, but also feels entirely new. This incarnation feels genuinely older, as David Tennant is older, but he feels older, he feels more mature. Yes, he's still running, not necessarily confronting everything that's happened, but there's less of a childlike quality to him that David Tennant's Doctor possessed at times. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that makes absolute sense, especially since this is the first time we have an actor returning to the role of a Doctor, but as a new incarnation. But I've adored what David has done with the 14th Doctor, and the boundaries that he goes to in this story in particular is really quite something, especially like the emotional resolution of it, which again we'll touch on in just a little bit. But now back to the madness. Let's talk about Spice Up Your Life. That's right, we have a little dance routine, again very similar to John Sims' Master with things like Voodoo Child. The Toymaker enters Unit HQ, singing and dancing to Spice Up Your Life by the Spice Girls. A great song, and you can tell that Neil Patrick Harris is having the time of his life. He's giving it everything he's got, and it's a great showcase of how the Toymaker can just manipulate reality, you know, appear out of thin air, turn bullets into flower petals, turn approaching soldiers into balloons, which is actually quite horrifying. You know, I really love that showcase of his power, and shows what a genuine threat he can be, a being that Unit can't necessarily stop in the traditional way, a being that the Doctor even struggles to deal with in the traditional way. It was one of my favourite scenes, and every time I watch it, I genuinely look forward to hearing the opening bars of Spice Up Your Life. I just think it's definitely one of the highlight scenes, and if you haven't seen it, well, you're definitely missing out. Speaking of Unit, let's talk about them in general. Always nice to see Unit back. We've still got Kate Stewart as the head of Unit. I've always personally enjoyed Gemma Redgrave and her portrayal of this character, so anytime she comes back, that's a joy for me. We have Ruth Madeley as well, returning as Shirley, who of course appeared in the Starbeast. I'm really warming to her character, and I do hope that we get to see more of her during Ncuti's tenure. I think that might have already been leaked/confirmed, but I hope we do at the very least. I know some people are raising what happened to Osgood. I mean, Ingrid Oliver might well be busy, or she might have said no. We don't know, but I mean, I'm quite happy with the Unit team we've got at the minute. Also, we have Mel, who comes back, played by the marvellous Bonnie Langford. And let me tell you, when the Doctor clocks that it's Mel, and just his sheer happiness at seeing her is joyous, because I think it's lovely when Doctors do meet old companions and have that reaction. Just shows the joy and love that's still there. And Bonnie Langford as well, isn't she a great actor? I mean, people always lamented her, or a lot of people did back in the 80s. I'd argue she wasn't necessarily given the most to do back then in 86, 87, but now I love that we get a little moment where, you know, we have a quick version of how she ended up back on Earth. We get a Sabalom Glitz reference in 2023. That was my highlight, I'm telling you now. But also, you know, she mentions that when she did come back, everyone she knew had gone. She became this orphan, again reinforcing, I guess, what the Toymaker was trying to get across with companions, that yes, whilst they travel with the Doctor, it often ends in negative consequences. Part of me wanted that to be built on a tiny bit more, but I think what we got was nice enough. I'm just glad Mel got a bit of that closure to catch everyone up to speed, and just for her to be there, she was a joyous presence in the episode. Now let's touch on the big moment itself. So the Toymaker has got the galvanic beam. He's positioning it at the Doctor and various other people. The Doctor's demanding that they have another game to settle it before the Toymaker shoots him, claiming he played the first game with one Doctor, the second game with this one, so therefore he should play the final game with the next Doctor. So, as you'd expect, Tennant falls to the floor, Donna and Mel by his side. We're expecting him to regenerate in this big flurry like we've come to expect, and Ncuti to take over. Well, as you probably know, that doesn't happen. Instead, Tennant remains, and then they pull his arms, and then Ncuti Gatwa splits off from him. We have our very first bi-generation. Now, I know this theory was sort of leaked months ago, and a lot of fans resented it. I think a lot of fans, having had time to process that leak, have come to accept this a lot more than they maybe anticipated. Personally, I love the idea of bi-generation. It's something new. Doctor Who has always thrived off new ideas and new things happening. And this idea of tradition, whilst tradition is nice and, tradition and having things the same is something we as humans like to cling on to, I do think it's important as well to introduce new concepts like this. And, bi-generation's a myth. Oh, but it's happened. Fine, great. We still get 2 Doctors at present. It's technically a multi-Doctor special, which is what I know so many people wanted in the first place. But yeah, this idea that, 2 Doctors can sort of coexist, and Russell's saying this has spawned the Doctorverse. I'm all for bi-generation, basically. A realm where Doctors regenerate traditionally, and one where they continue on as I think that's fab, and I think big props for coming up with these new ideas. This is a 60-year-old show. New ideas can be hard to come by sometimes, but I'm really glad they've come up with this one. And right from the get-go, you can just see Ncuti Gatwa's energy, his presence is electric, and he absolutely laps it up, standing shoulder to shoulder with David Tennant. Before I talk more about Ncuti, I just want to talk about then the resolution of the Toymaker. So they do play a game with him, the first game of all, catch, so they're just throwing a ball around. If you drop it, you lose. Now, this happens, and I'm fine with catch being the game, but I've always thought, having watched it 3 times now, that the Toymaker is disposed of a little bit too quickly. This is such a minor criticism. I'm fine with the resolution. They're bound by a 60-minute runtime. They've got to wrap it up somehow. But I don't know. I think had the game of catch been made even more dynamic than it was, or there'd be show more of a struggle for the Doctors in defeating him. I understand that there's 2 of them, so they've got that advantage as well. But I don't know. I'm not saying this is a bad point, but in my mind, I'm just thinking, it would have been nice for that to either have gone on a little bit longer or had even more tension added to it. It was just a little bit too quick for my liking, just personally, that's all. And when the Toymaker is disposed of, he gets flat-packed back into his box. He does say, "My legions are coming." What legions are those, you might ask? Well, again, I'm hoping that we find out in the next few series. And also, that gold tooth, remember I mentioned about the Master being in the gold tooth? That is picked up by a woman with red fingernails. Now, that's happened before, with John Sims Master. A lot of comparisons to John Sims Master, with Lucy Saxon picking up the ring after the Master's been burned. I don't think this is Lucy Saxon. A lot of theories are pointing that it's actually Kate Stewart, because we do see in some shots that she is wearing red fingernails, and that would be very interesting. Why would Kate want the Master? Maybe to use him within unit, maybe as some form of revenge? I don't really know, but maybe that implies that at some point in the near future, the Master, in one of their forms, we don't know which, will inevitably return. So let's delve into what we've already seen of Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor. Energy, man. Energy, energy, energy. This Doctor has energy for days. He's vibrant, he's beaming, he's bouncing. But what I also loved right when they addressed this is that he has such compassion, such empathy, and that willingness to be vulnerable. After they look out to London and the 14th Doctor laments on how many have died, the 15th pulls him into a hug, saying that I've got you, and, it's all right, it's okay. And that really hit, man, because we've all been in those situations where we just need someone we love to pull us into a hug and say, you know what, mate, it's all right, it's absolutely fine, I've got you. And, especially over the past few years, what with everything with the pandemic and people losing others and others struggling to process just the events of what happened during that time, I think that was such a poignant moment, and a very important moment as well for Doctor Who as a whole, that this character in this incarnation can be this empathetic and really, cling on to the people that they love. And the whole thing of, Ncuti Gatwa knocking out another TARDIS with the hammer, but, it's the Toymaker's domain, man. I'm all for it. Of course he's going to have his own TARDIS as well. But that scene in the TARDIS where, you know, Donna's basically telling David Tennant, you've got to just stop and let go. You've come home. You know, you can have sort of a life with us. You can stick around. I thought that was immensely sweet. And again, very, very poignant. David Tennant and Catherine Tate are playing it to perfection. And it just highlights the new direction this new era's going in. Speaking on that, let's talk about the main final scene, which is the closure for the 14th Doctor. We see him in the garden of the Noble family. They're all there, all of those who appeared in the Star Beast. Even Wolf gets a mention off screen. Of course, Bernard sadly couldn't film in person as he'd passed on, but they still allude that he's there. And just the, you know, and Mel's there as well, Mad Auntie Mel. And just the fact that this Doctor claims he has never been happier because after all those battles he fought, it's for moments like this, just sitting in the garden with a family, enjoying life. And it's very emotional. I found it very powerful and a beautiful end to David Tennant's portrayals of the Doctor in particular. Both the 10th and 14th are very emotional incarnations. You know, one ravaged by the Time War, that sense of guilt. This one a bit more mature, but still lamenting on different things that have happened in his life. I think that was a beautiful end for that character. And I'm glad, personally, that that character has a happy ending, as does Donna and her family. Why not? You know, we still get the emotional heartbreak that happened back in 2008, but to see it rectified like this, I think is a really beautiful end. And then we finish with seeing Ncuti Gatwa flying off into the stars, who will of course return for Christmas Day, and the church on Ruby Road, which from the trailers and little clips already looks like it's going to be wacky, but really good fun. So I can't wait to see that on Christmas Day, and I hope that you'll be watching it as well. So overall on the Giggle, I must be honest, I think this is now my favourite of the anniversary specials. While Blue Yonder eclipsed the Star Beast, but this has eclipsed it for me. It's a great story, the first 2/3 in particular with the Toymaker, a great villain setup, great to show his power, his manipulativeness, his insanity in a way. I thought that was all handled wonderfully. Neil Patrick Harris, one of the best guest actors we've had in years playing this part, absolutely. All the regulars are on form, Catherine Tate, the unit crew, David Tennant, massive props to, again, carving out this such layered character in just 3 TV specials. That's not an easy feat to do, and yet he's managed to do it. And of course, Ncuti Gatwa for bursting onto the scene with such a unforgettable introduction that is going to keep people talking for time and time to come. And I'm really excited to see how his Doctor develops in the Christmas special and beyond. So overall, I'd argue the 60th anniversary specials have been a triumph for the programme. They've absolutely reinvigorated interest in some who maybe haven't watched for years. I've talked to people who haven't watched since, you know, maybe partway through Jodie's era or Capaldi's era, even as far back as Matt Smith's era. There are people I'm talking to who haven't watched in 15 years who are coming back to this show. And hopefully, from what they've seen, they're going to stick around for the brand new era that will kick off very soon. Really happy with this episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As always, do keep it civil with each other. We are all just fans. We can agree to disagree. That's absolutely fine. But let me know your thoughts on the Giggle in the comments down below. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to us here at AMTV Who if you're brand new. We'd like to have you aboard. And in the meantime, I've been Adam Martin from AMTV Who. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time for another trip in the TARDIS.